Toney.
Yeah.
You want to know who Ezra Charles was? 95% of what James Toney has came from Ezra Charles. So that tells you all you need to know about Ezra Charles. And you think about a James Toney and all of his skills and attributes fighting in the 50s, and that's all you need to know about how great Ezra Charles was. But let's talk about Ernest Shavers. Some people say Ernest Shavers was the hardest puncher of all time.
You got boxers say that Ernest Shavers was
You know why I can't give Ernest Shavers the hardest puncher of all time? I'm probably going to take some heat for this. You know why I can't give him the greatest puncher of all time? Because when you needed your punch to matter the most, you couldn't get it done. You can't be the hardest puncher of all time until you get in with the big dogs. You got to knock out some of the big dogs. Now, Ali, nobody was knocking out Ali. You know, probably was hard to knock out that. He scored landed the hardest punch that didn't score a knockout probably ever in the punch that he landed against Larry Holmes. I'm sure when Larry Holmes got up, he was just dejected from that punch. But you lose to nobody was knocking out Tex Carby. So take Ali and Carb off the table. You couldn't beat Ron Lyle. There's a couple other guys you lost to that were top contenders that he couldn't finish. You know, he should have been able to beat a couple of guys that he couldn't beat. But my thing with him is the greatest fighter he beat was Ken Norton. And Norton was past his prime. They both were past their prime. But my only problem with Ernest Shavers was when he needed the punch to make him the heavyweight champion of the world, it failed him. He couldn't get you can't be the hardest puncher of all. See, all of the greatest punchers of all time, they were all great punchers. And the reason why, he's on Ring Magazine's list, he's number 6. The guys who were ahead of him all were great punchers against great fighters. Yeah. Their punch wasn't just knocking out the contenders, but when they got to fight the king, they could knock out the king too. Yeah. You can't just knock out the pawns, and when you fight the king and you hit him with your best shot, he just shake it off. Now, you got to be able to knock out the king too. So Shavers is up there though. You got Sandy Sadler. Sandy Sadler was the guy we talked about, Willie Pep, last week. Sandy Sadler was the little man, the first really thin guy who kind of Jimmy Wild really was the first really thin guy that scored a lot of knockouts. He's on the list too. But Sandy Sadler was the guy, really thin, really long, had to retire early because of an eye injury. I didn't know that until I was about 27. But he was a guy who basically Willie Pep couldn't beat. Now he's got a reputation. He was a really dirty fighter, and he was. He did a lot of dirty stuff in the ring. But he was a great puncher. George Foreman, we know how.
Yeah, we know George.
We know Big George was. Yeah. The thing about George is, let me tell you how scary George's punching power is. Here's how scary George's punching power is. George's punching power was so scary that he threw all of his punches absolutely the incorrect way and still knocked people out. He was the most fundamentally unsound puncher in history and still hurt you. Just imagine if he would have threw his punches crisp like Tyson did. Can you imagine that? It's scary.
George Foreman was knocking punching bags out the ceiling.
George Foreman was hitting Joe Frazier.
He was lifting him off his feet.
Joe started leaning. Angelo Dundee screened up from ringside. Man, George is hurt. Joe is hurt, and he was. Man, that dude. You're right. He lifted him off the ground.
Off his feet.
He almost launched him. Sugar Ray Robinson, greatest fighter of all time, was that you. First of all, you're a great puncher if you kill a man with one punch. Not that should be the measure stick. But he knocked out the great Gene Foreman, who couldn't be knocked out. Knocked him out with one punch. Gene didn't even know he was. Gene didn't even hit a count. Sugar Ray Robinson, when you look at Sugar Ray Robinson, one of the reasons why Sugar Ray Robinson was a great puncher, not just because of his natural, we talk about George and how his punches were incorrect. Look at Sugar Ray Robinson and the torque he gets on his punches. When you watch a still shot of Sugar Ray Robinson, a punch finishing, you'll notice his foot, whichever way he turns, his foot turned all the way out because he's getting all of his whole body, his legs, his hip. He's almost like a pitcher.
Hey, you ever seen somebody get hit so hard you jump?
Yeah. When Roberto Duran got hit by Tommy Hearns, somebody was. I was funny. I was watching that fight on YouTube not too long ago, and somebody was watching on YouTube, and I saw the comments pop up. Oh man, that punch made my headphones pop off. But then you get to my favorite, Julian the Hawk Jackson, who I think is the greatest puncher of all time. Julian Jackson broke Terry Norris's chin. I say that because
spin that chin.
you look at Terry Norris' fight, before that fight, Terry Norris could take a punch.
Spin that chin.
But when he got hit by Julian, that all went away. Julian was just, oh my God.
He was starching dudes in that ring.
Julian,
I'm talking about stiff.
Bro,
You ever seen somebody get knocked out in the arms?
Julian Jackson was
Stiff
hitting
up.
guys, and they were asleep standing up, and they would just fall. Like, sometimes I watch Julian Jackson fights, and I'm like, what was the ref? What is he counting for?
Hey, did you see the guy that he knocked out, and he hit the first rope, then he hit the second rope, then he hit the third rope, didn't fail?
Yeah. His most famous knockout was, of course, the one against Harold Graham. But that was Terry Norris and Harold Graham, those two. Then the guy who ultimately bested him, you got to talk about him, although his career ended in an unfortunate way, Gerald the G-Man McClellan. Gerald McClellan was a vile puncher. Gerald McClellan is the guy that should have been showing pictures. If Deontay Wilder would have been, Deontay Wilder's on the list too, we're going to talk about him in a minute, but Gerald McClellan was the guy that when I look at Deontay Wilder, Gerald McClellan has the one thing that Deontay Wilder needed. Gerald McClellan had, you talk about Deontay Wilder's right hand anytime he touch somebody, he goes to sleep.
Rocket.
That was Gerald McClellan. His right hand touches you and you are asleep. But you know what happened with what Gerald McClellan had also? When you ducked that right hand because you're so terrified of it, he would swing that weight back across with a left hook to the liver that would make you piss yourself. Yeah. He scored just as many showy one-punch knockouts.
Blood.
He had just as many spectacular knockouts with that left hook to the liver than he did with that right hand. And I always thought if somebody would teach Deontay after you go throw that right,
that liver shot,
come back with the left hook to the liver because you're in perfect position because you done swung all your way forward, swing it back with the left hook to the liver, man, he would have been unbeatable. He would have been unbeatable.
He would have probably got Tyson Fury out of there with that.
Yeah. I agree with that. Speaking of Tyson, no punches list is complete without Mike Tyson.
That's a fact.
Mike.
Iron Mike
Tyson. Physical anomaly, physical oddity. When you look at this list, right? You look at Sandy Salas, Sugar Ray Robinson, Julian Jackson, Thomas Hearns, Bob Foster. A lot of these guys.
I think Tyson is scariest though, bro.
Here's the thing about Mike Tyson.
Tyson won a lot of the fights just off of the face-off.
Tyson was the first guy who looked like he looked, who could punch like he looked like he could punch like that.
Yeah.
Boxing, usually the hardest punchers are the lean guys because they can stand further away. Sadler, Jackson, Tommy, Foster, the lean guys, they stand far away. They punch down.
Yeah.
The torque they get on their punches. Mike Tyson was a guy who just brute strength and technique. Peekaboo defense, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Peekaboo. Floyd Patterson fought that style too. That's the style we were thinking about, the peekaboo defense. But he was a guy who had enough torque on his punches.
He'll lift grown ass man off his feet too.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the way he finished Pinklin Thomas, who had an iron chin, but cause he had to. If you look at the punches Mike was hitting with, that's still, to me, that's scary. I remember being in my cousin P. Hall watching that fight. The dude's punches literally made one of the biggest keys to Mike Tyson's success early on was that as soon as you got hit, that saying everybody got a game plan till they get hit him out. Like that was, you could see that happening. Like guys would come out ready to box, ready to try, and he would hit dudes and they would just
yeah.
They can't get their balance.
You know what I loved about Tyson, man, the most?
What?
He got right to it.
He got right to it.
Right to it.
Right.
It ain't no
right to it.
Jab. I'm about to try to see
right.
what you got.
His jab was mean. His jab was mean too.
He got right to it.
That dude had so many tools, man. If he could have just stayed,
man, that left to the body and left uppercut to the face.
If he would have just stayed with his core, man, stay with your trainer, stay with them people. Don't let them Muslims come in talking that black stuff and you need to get with your people. This that, man. If he would have stayed with Rooney, bruh.
Yeah.
What could have been?
What if Customato never died, bro?
What? I don't even want to talk about that.
That boy be undefeated still to this day.
Talk about that, bro. I don't want to talk about that.
See, we talking about these fighters now, though. Like, let's talk about the trainers, though, right? Because these fighters are being trained by trainers. You understand what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, when you're talking about we don't see certain things anymore in today's fight that we used to see back in the day. how much of that can we actually blame on the fighters versus the trainer?
A lot of it's the trainers, and you know what's funny? You mentioned that because a lot of these trainers are young.
Yeah.
A lot of them are young. They themselves don't have, and a lot of them were so fighters themselves. See, Georgie Benton could teach Pernell Whitaker what he could teach him because he was a great Georgie Benton.
Yeah.
Even somebody like Freddie Roach, who was a good. You go and watch Freddie Roach. Got Parkinson's because he was a fighter. He was a hell of a fighter. Yeah. Go back and look at the footage of Freddie Roach. Freddie Roach wasn't no punk.
Yeah.
I mean, but he grew up. He came up in the '80s. He was an
Freddie
'80s
Roach
fighter.
had Pacquiao.
Freddie Roach was a fighter. Grew up in the era where you were a really really good fighter and you still couldn't win a world championship.
Right.
Yeah. Huh? Cause D'Amato. Emmanuel was a good, a solid Emmanuel top Stewart. Amateur fighter. Yep. So you have a lot of great fighters who become great trainers. You have a lot of guys who are just okay fighters who become great trainers just because they understand what they didn't have and they understand what it takes. Angelo Dundee, Lou Duva, Nacho Berenstein.
I think Teddy Atlas would be a good trainer.
Teddy Atlas was an excellent trainer. Nacho Berenstein, who trained two of my favorite fighters, Juan Manuel Marquez and Ricardo Lopez. His ability to teach Mexican fighters to be both aggressive and intelligent at the same time is Nacho Berenstein is one of the most underrated trainers. Only in the black arena, like in the world, we know Nacho, but fight fans know who he is. But that dude, to his ability to teach, go back and watch Ricardo Lopez, 51-0 with I can't remember knocks like 39 knockouts, retired undefeated before Floyd had that one draw. And you know what he did with Juan Manuel Marquez. The dude just was a teacher of the technical aspect of boxing, and that's what you don't see a lot of people teaching the technical aspects of boxing anymore. How to punch. You look at guys like Thomas Hitman Hearns. Emmanuel Stewart had to build him from the ground up. He was a little skinny, puny little weakling. Yeah. Emmanuel Stewart turned.
Emmanuel Stewart also had Lennox Lewis, Vladimir Klitschko.
Emmanuel Stewart is the ultimate real and raw trainer.
Yeah.
What I mean by real and raw, the jab is the real Jin, and then the raw right hand. Look at all his fighters; they all the same.
Yeah.
Tommy,
the 1-2s,
Milton McCrory,
Lennox
Lewis,
hard 1-2s,
1-2s,
hard 1-2s.
But the key to the 1-2 is you had to have an extraordinary jab.
Yeah.
Because when you know that, think about Thomas Hearns, the most violent right hand in boxing history, right? Lennox Lewis, one of the top 5 most violent right hands. Who did they fight that didn't know that right hand was coming?
Right.
And yet you still got hit.
With it
because the jab takes your attention. That jab is beating your back in, it's beating your neck up, and so you still get by that right because that jab is working you over.
Sometimes that jab be so hard, you might want to just say, man, just give me the right.
Yeah.
Rocky Marciano was
Rocky Marciano was up there. Rock knocked out an old Joe Louis. Let's talk about. Joe Louis is old.
Like that. I don't like that.
Stopped Joe Walcott with the Suzy Q punch. One of the most famous knockouts in history.
Walcott was nice.
All Walcott had to do was move the other way.
Walcott was nice though.
He was winning the fight.
Yeah.
When he got knocked out, he was winning that fight. Carlos Zarte. I want to talk about Carlos Zarte. Carlos Zarte started off his career like 49-0 with 48 knockouts.
Damn.
Right. I think 52-0-1. I think with 51 knockouts before he lost to this guy right here.
That's some Deontay Wilder.
Wilfredo Gomez, who was 32-0 with 32 knockouts. And Wilfredo, we all know what happened to Wilfredo. He fought this young kid, this young babyface kid, out of Mexico named Salvador Sanchez, and we're going to talk about that next. Some of the great what-ifs in boxing history. The what-ifs, people who would have been all-time greats if they wouldn't have passed.
Yeah, if they wouldn't have passed away, man.
So, the ultimate, the one that's on everybody's, the top of everyone's list is Salvador Sanchez. He was 23 years old when he passed away. Knocked out the great Danny Lopez to become the featherweight champion of the world. Be Lupe Pintor.
Salvador Sanchez was Roy Jones' favorite
one of Roy's favorite fighters.
Yeah.
Knocked out Wilfredo Gomez in a great battle of Mexico versus Puerto Rico. one of the great Mexican-Puerto Rico battles, where it wasn't just a battle of the fighter, but it was a battle of the bands.
Yeah.
Go back on YouTube. That fight is hilarious. Wilfredo comes to the ring first because he's moving up to challenge Salvador for his featherweight title. He has like the Puerto Rican band, and they playing in the ring with their trumpets and they playing. And Salvador comes to the ring with a mariachi band, and he gets in the ring, and the mariachi band comes in the middle of the ring, and then Wilfredo Gomez band, they get crunk up again, and they come march to the middle of the ring, and you see both bands like march to the middle of the ring and like trying to outplay each other. It's hilarious, bro. It's hilarious. It was one of the greatest.
That sounds like Stomp the Yard.
It was one of those fights, man. Like there are certain fights in history where like, which fights would you have loved to have been at? That one. I would have loved to have been in the ring, in the arena, in the crowd when that fight happened, man. That was one of the greatest fights in history. Yeah. But Salvador Sanchez was on the fight one night. He was supposed to fight one fighter, train to fight one fight. I can't remember who the guy was, but the fighter dropped out of the fight, right? So he had to fight this young, unknown kid out of Ghana, out of Africa, who had like 12 fights. He was undefeated, only had 12 fights. The kid was Azuma Nelson, and the kid was beating Salvador. He was winning the fight, but Salvador Sanchez is known for three things: being smooth as butter, having iron lungs, having an iron chin, and the kid got tired, and he stopped him in the 14th or 15th round. The fight was so great, Azuma was so impressive that there was a rematch that was going to take place. Salvador was going to train for the rematch. He was killed in a car accident. Salvador Sanchez, I tell anybody this. I tell a lot of my Mexican brothers this. Because they all think that as a Mexican fighter, you have to fight one way. I always tell them, before you say that, YouTube Salvador Sanchez.
That's a fact.
YouTube Salvador Sanchez.
He was
smooth like butter, bro. I mean, this boy could dance. He could move. And then he would get in there and finish you when he had you hurt.
Oh, yeah. He hit hard.
He hit hard. He could take a punch. He's boxing's greatest what if in reference to Don. There's another fighter who fought in the
Hold on, before you say that, let me just say this real quick. Shout out to FYBJ Maine. It hit different when you fighting 15 rounds.
Oh, bro.
It hit different when you fighting 15 rounds.
Bro.
It hit different.
It hit different, yeah. That's a whole different.
Shout out to J Maine.
That's a whole different that's a whole different world. There's another fighter, the next biggest what if, probably even bigger what if. The middleweight, you're talking about hardest punches, he's on this list. He's got to be near the top. Let me see how far down I got to go till I see him. I think this is the last in 100 years, so he's not on here because he'd be in the top 5. A fella by the name of Stanley Ketchel. Stanley Ketchel was a middleweight champion of the world, probably one of the 5 hardest punches in boxing history. Why do I say that? Because Stanley Ketchel, who was 157 pounds, fought against Jack Johnson. It's supposed to be a fight where because Jack was 200 pounds, Stanley was 150 something, where he just kind of moved around and kind of Jack promised not to hurt him. He just looked like Stanley. I guess he said, "This is I'm gonna take a chance to try to win heavyweight title." Yeah. Hit Jack, knocked Jack down. Jack got up. Jack got pissed. Hit Stanley, almost killed him. And if you watch the still, it's an old clip. You can see Jack standing over in the corner picking Stanley's teeth out of his glove. But that dude was.
Wait a minute, repeat that.
Yeah, he was picking Stanley Ketchell's teeth out of his glove.
They ain't wear mouthpieces back then, man.
Stanton, yeah, but I mean, Jack Johnson is 50 pounds, 40.
No, I just wanted you to say that.
About 40 pounds heavier than that dude. He hit him so hard, he himself launched himself forward. He fell, hitting Stanley. Stanley was just laid out in the middle of the ring. But Stanley Ketchel died. It's the weird. He was 24 years old, right? Middleweight champion of the world. He apparently he was staying he had rented a place to stay. And there was this young lady who was fancying him, but this young lady was married. Her husband didn't like that his wife was fancying Stanley Ketchel, and shoots and kills the man. Kills Stanley Ketchel, shoots him in the back, kills him. 24 years old.
Y'all better leave people's wives alone.
The man, 24 years old. Champion came along after him some years later. Considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. Harry Greb fought over 300-something fights. Died having nasal surgery, and so at 32 years old, and so did the man who beat him. Tiger Flowers, the first black middleweight champion, died having the same nasal surgery.
Tiger Flowers?
Yeah.
I ain't never heard.
First black middleweight champion of all time. Lost his title in a controversial fight to Mickey the Toy Bulldog Walker. But those are some more what ifs. There are a couple of others that were great, but they passed away. We talk about Vernon Forrest, R.I.P. Vernon.
Yeah, man.
Diego Chico Corrales.
That one hurt.
Chico
Corrales
Corrales
hurt. Yeah.
No. R.I.P. Chico. So those were a couple of other fighters.
Who was the black boxer? He was a black guy. He got after the fight, he actually got paralyzed. Became like a vegetable kind
of. No, he's paralyzed from the waist down. You talking about Paul the Punisher Williams?
Yeah.
Paul the Punisher Williams. Yeah. But like a lot of those guys were already on the other side of. I say if you're on the other side of 29, pushing 30. These other guys were like they were babies, man. Like Salvador and Stanley Ketchum were kids. Right. They were kids. They were 23, 24-year-old kids. Yeah. And they were cut down in a prime. Now, there's a lot of other what ifs, that are people who lived. What if Mike Tyson would have stayed with his crew? What if Aaron Pryor wouldn't have got, on cocaine, and just continued to be Aaron Pryor? Yeah. It's a whole lot of what ifs, man. But those are just some of the great what ifs, man.
What if Ali didn't go to jail?
What you know what? I want to talk about that from a different perspective because I've seen his perspective. What if he wouldn't have? His greatness would have continued to. He would have continued to be what he was. But doesn't that kind of add to his?
It does, though. It does.
Because think about it. He doesn't go to jail. He continues to just wipe the division out. After a while, people lose interest. Right? They don't like him because
that's a bar right there. Hold on. Sometimes the things that you go through add on to your greatness. You might think that you at a messed up spot right now. You might think that you at a place right now where you don't think you could come back from. You can't foresee it. And man, and let me just tell you, man, all that adds to the greatness of your story. All that is your testimony. And I just want to say this too. Don't ever make a house where it's meant for you to pitch a tent.
Yep.
You can't ever make a house where it was meant for you to pitch a tent.
Yep.
So temporary defeats, everything that you go through in life, man, it just adds on to your story. It adds on to your character. It helps you build as a person.
Think about this for a minute. Muhammad Ali never gets suspended, never goes to jail. Continues to just mow down the opponent. Doesn't lose any of his speed, doesn't lose any of his footwork. Fights 4 years later, fights the young kid who just won a gold medal, Joe Frazier. Right? Not having lost 4 years, not having lost his speed, not having lost any of that, and annihilates Frazier. Just think about something. Think about this. Muhammad Ali, when he fought Joe Frazier, he had fought a couple of fights since he had came back.
Right.
He wasn't the same guy.
No, he wasn't.
Right?
He wasn't.
Lost a lot of his speed, lost a lot of his movement, lost a lot of his reflexes, lost a lot of his agility. And fought Joe Frazier, who was at the absolute peak of his career, right? And the Muhammad Ali who lost all of that fights the very best Joe Frazier ever was, and Joe Frazier barely wins that fight.
Right.
Just imagine if that's a Muhammad Ali who has no suspension. He mows through Joe Frazier. Nobody ever knows who Joe Frazier was.
That's true.
But the fact that Joe Frazier became the champion after Ali, and it was undefeated champion versus undefeated champion, it adds to the legacy of both of them.
That's true.
If Muhammad Ali doesn't go through what he goes through, Joe Frazier is just another contender that he mows down.
Right. No, that's true. That's true, man.
So I think all of that added to the legend. It showed, and really, if you talk about Tyson and you talk about Ali, the reality is this. Tyson should have been able to come back greater than Ali did, because Muhammad Ali's style was more based in athleticism and reflexes and movement than Tyson's was.
That's true.
But when you look, and Tyson came back from suspension to some killers. Frazier, Foreman, Norton. He came back to some killers, bro. Mm. You know what I mean? And coming back to those killers was still able to be great. Was still able to be great. Like, and Mike, props to Mike, he's still one of the greatest ever, but that's where Ali got the one up. Because he was able to come back and beat the other greats who came after him.
Hey man, so let me ask you this. So we know Canelo, Charlo coming soon. Mm-hmm. We just got word that Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder coming soon. Jamel want to fight Terrence Bud Crawford. We have a lot of big fights coming up. So who do you see that's on the rise? See me, I see Shakur Stevenson. That's my number one guy that I see coming up. Mm-hmm. You know, we always gonna go with the yellow assassin. Yellow assassin, Tank Davis.
Tank Davis isn't coming up anymore. Tank Davis isn't.
No, but he's somebody we gotta watch.
Yeah, he ain't on the horizon. He it was remember the rapper Mad Skills? He had one of the greatest lines in rap history. He said, "If I'm up and coming, then the rest of y'all is down and leaving." Like if Tank Davis is up and coming, everybody else down and leaving. He here. He
got a lot. He got some fights. He got some mega fights.
He do.
I wonder if him and Terrence Crawford gonna fight.
You know who's a good up and comer? If he waits his turn, Boots Ennis.
Yeah,
but you gotta wait your turn.
Yeah,
don't be Julian Jackson running in there against body snatcher.
That's a fact.
Wait your turn. Don't be Terry Norris running in against Julian. Wait your turn.
Wait your turn.
Good, great fighter, up and coming. Wait your turn.
Yeah, wait
your turn. You know, if an opportunity, and Terrence already said there's no win-win in that for him, so that probably won't happen.
Yeah, he did.
It probably won't happen. But you know, wait your turn. Like Marvin, that's what Marvelous Marvin Hagg was so great. That was nothing in that for him to fight John the Beast McGuire, but he fought him anyway, and destroyed him. You know, destroyed the Beast. But up and coming fighters, Boots Ennis.
Devin Haney not really up and coming.
He not up and coming anymore. I think
Shakur Stevenson.
I was gonna say David Benavidez, but he ain't up and coming no more either.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the next up and comer who impresses me, not just somebody who is up and coming in name.
Man, it's an Asian fighter. I forget his name.
Yeah, talking about anyway.
Man, what's the Asian fighter?
Not anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, 30 years old. Anyway.
But we just not hearing about it.
You just not hearing about it. I remember when he turned pro. I watched his pro debut. He been fighting.
30?
Huh?
He 30?
He 30 years old. He been fighting 12 years.
Damn.
Yeah, he anyway been around. And anyway, talk about him. It's a hard puncher. That dude technically he had that first fight against Nonito Donaire where he was getting hit a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Nonito Donaire's a great fighter.
Yeah, he is. He a Hall of Fame.
First ballot Hall of Fame.
He Hall of Fame.
But that dude studied, he is a guy who he is the true definition of gets better every time.
Yeah.
It's very rare that a fighter gets better every time. We don't have a lull. You know, some fighters fight a couple of great fights, and then another fight, they don't lose, but they don't look like they was on tonight. This dude just gets better every time he fights.
Yeah.
He's already the greatest Japanese fighter of all time to me.
Oh, that's a fact.
He's already the greatest Japanese fighter of all time.
A lot of them don't be having chins. He could take a punch.
He can take a shot, yeah.
He could take a punch.
That's not a big enough sample size of great Japanese fighters. Yeah. Fighting Hardana had a great chin because he was the greatest Japanese fighter before. Yeah. Because he beat the great Edo Joe for the greatest Brazilian fighter of all time, Edo Joe. Edo Joe had 2 losses in his career, both to Harder. One of them was both of them were actually pretty controversial. But fighting Harada was a great Japanese fighter. Mm-hmm. He had a pretty good chin because Joe would push you up. Yeah. So for him to R.I.P. Edo Joe, he died I think he died earlier this year. So R.I.P. to the greatest Brazilian fighter of all time. People don't talk about him. You talk about the greatest Latin fighters of all time. For whatever reason, he gets left out. But when you fight that many, I think he was 72. Let me look up Edo Joe first record. Edo Joe was, I think 72, 2-3 or something like that.
That's a good record.
And you know, retired, still a champion. And he only lost to he only lost the fight for whatever reason. And see, that's when fighters would dare to be great, bro. Yeah, he was 72, 2-4, 50 knockouts. Started the most wins without a loss to start a career for a long time. 47, 0-3. Right? Fighting Harada, loses his bantamweight title. Loses again to Harada, both by decision, both by close decisions. retires for a time, comes back, wins the featherweight title, and retires not with like running off like, I don't know, like 30 straight wins. Greatest Brazilian fighter of all. Nobody never talks about him with the, he's top 5. He's one of the 5 greatest Latino fighters of all time. You got Roberto Duran. You got Julio Cesar Chavez. You got Edo Joe. You got Carlos Monzon. And you got Salvador Sanchez. Those are the 5. Carlos Monzon was a nut. But those are the 5 greatest Latino fighters of all time. But Harada, to go back to the Japanese fighter, he was the greatest Japanese fighter before came along. But yeah, that kid is phenomenal. But he's not. I wouldn't consider him a prospect though. What I want to see. I want to talk about this for a minute because I want to get something off my chest. Can I get some off my chest for me?
Get some off your chest.
Let me get some.
Get up out of here anyway. Go and get it off your chest.
Let me tell y'all something. I am looking for the next great heavyweight superstar. And here's what I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for somebody who was a failed football player.
Check.
Who now you want to try boxing. Can I tell y'all something? We are not the place to come if you can't play football. Boxing is not the sport to try if you failed it. Let me explain something to you. Let me tell you how this thing used to go. This thing you talk to you look at interviews from some of the great fighters from the 50s and 60s, not the great fighters, great athletes from the 50s and 60s who were excelling in other sports. You know the first place they started? The boxing gym. You know why they left the boxing gym? Wasn't good enough. They had to go and play something else because they had to go play football or baseball or basketball because the gym was too rough. Back in the day, and see, that's why I don't believe in this whole thing. Boxing gets greater athletes than they used to. No, sir. Because boxing got the cream of the crop athletes.
That's a fact.
Boxing, basketball, and football didn't get the greatest athletes in the world. Boxing did.
Yep.
So when you were watching Joe Louis, you were watching the greatest athlete on the planet.
Check.
Muhammad Ali was whoever the greatest football player was, at the same time Muhammad Ali was champion, was not a greater athlete than Muhammad Ali.
Check.
Here's how you know that. You Google or YouTube footage of prime Muhammad Ali moving like he's moving. That was in the early 60s. Who have we seen since then who's been that athletic as a heavyweight?
Crickets.
But athletes get bigger and stronger fast over time, though. That's what the young kids say. That's what the athletes get. So how is it that a guy in the 60s was the greatest athlete we ever saw at heavyweight? And there haven't been an athlete, the only one that could come close athletically was Tyson.
Yeah.
But there hasn't been anybody as a heavyweight who can move and dance like Ali. And he fought in the 60s, the early 60s, also all the way so that even in the late 70s, he was still whooping dudes. But the athletes that boxing used to get were the best athletes. Those were the greatest athletes on the planet. And I say that to say this. You can't be a failed athlete at another sport and come to a harder sport. Boxing is the hardest sport.
It's the hardest.
You can't be a failed. Deontay Wilder did it. God bless him for doing it because
he got a rocket though.
He got a rocket. And
he got a rocket.
And he was able to do it in an era where the talent was. He couldn't have done this in the Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield. He could have done this then. He could have done this then.
Nah, he couldn't.
He could have done this. Riddick Bowe would have killed him.
Yeah.
But please stop. Like I'm tired of looking at fighters and on the undercard they got these heavyweight prospects and it's some fat dude who used to play football and they just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, man.
Boxing is a sport that
it's a sweet science, man.
Sweet science. You gotta put in the time, and you can't come to boxing when you're 25, 26. Talking about you want to box. Yeah. You're not going to be able to learn what you need to learn, man. So I'm looking for the next great heavyweight prospect, and I need that to be somebody who grows up. You know who did that, and you know why he's so great? People don't really want to give him his props. But this is the reason why he's better than everybody of his era, because that's exactly what Tyson Fury did. Tyson
started
Fury
early.
Grew up boxing.
Yeah.
He looks funny. He looks like the Michelin Man.
He named after a boxer, man.
Bro, he looks like the Michelin Man, but the dude has skills. He has skills that were cultivated from the time he was a kid.
Yeah.
Then in the crunk gym as a teenager, he is a boxer. That's why he clowns everybody. He's just not what you would like your heavyweight champion to look like.
Yep.
But he's the reason why he's clowning these
one of them ones
is because he's one of those dudes who grew up.
He one of them ones
fighting, and dudes can't touch him. That's what I'm looking for. Another Tyson Fury, but built better.
Hey, man.
Somebody who grew up boxing.
And with that, we gonna sign out, man. Hey, get the clapping. Hey, man. Welcome to the Big Fish Podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 2, man. Episode 2. Albert, I appreciate you for coming out.
Appreciate you for having me.
Man, chopping it up with me about the sport of boxing.
Appreciate you for having me.
We got a lot more to do, man.
Let's do it.
We got a lot more to do.
Let's do it.
Hey, y'all have yourself a good night.